Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this presentation by the Monroe County Mental Health Coalition. My name is Sierra Phillips. I'm the local recovery coordinator at the Toma VA Medical Center, and I am presenting this information to you in collaboration with the Mental Health Coalition for Mental Health Month, which is an awareness month that is recognized all during the month of May. And the idea is to create a dialogue about mental health issues and mental wellness. And we hope to create a conversation tonight with our presentation, creating a wellness recovery action plan. So WRAP, or a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, was developed by individuals who have lived experience with mental health and addiction, and they were living with mental health challenges and started asking questions about ways that they could engage their wellness in a more dynamic way. Were there other things that they could do to support themselves, ways that they could become educated and more involved and active, taking ownership of their mental wellness? And so several dozen people came together around 1997, all individuals with lived experience, and had a conversation about what they were struggling with, things that worked for them, maybe things that didn't work so well, and really what they could do to support one another and to support themselves and really engage in their own wellness journey. And Mary Ellen Copeland is the founder of the Copeland Center and really the developer of WRAP, and she and Jane Winterling collaborated together to create the structure that we now know as Wellness Recovery Action Plan. They presented it to this group of folks that they had met with, and they surveyed about 125 individuals who identified as having a lived experience of mental illness and recovery. And foundational concepts came through over and over again in terms of things that really worked or inspired folks engaging in their wellness journey. And we'll talk about what those 5 key concepts are shortly. That led to the development of this framework, this balanced perspective of how can I take a look at myself, kind of do a holistic self-assessment, look at the strengths and tools that I have access to, resources that I have access to, and really use that to proactively plan for when life happens or things might get a little bit stressful. And that took the form of Wellness Recovery Action Plan. It's a tool that Mary Ellen Copeland developed and used herself, was very passionate about, and really evolved into several different forms that are still used today. They started mentoring other peers or individuals with lived experience. They led a bunch of workshops, teaching folks about this model and facilitating a process of engaging other people in this way of looking at wellness and really taking stock of what we look like when we're well and how do we show up as our best self in life and in relationship to our surroundings and other people, and then really training them on how to use WRAP. They established this list of values and ethics that are really non-negotiable in terms of using WRAP, and that formed what is now recognized by the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration as an evidence-based practice, meaning it's been studied thoroughly, researched by folks who use it, and found to be effective when used in this specific way. So she then went on to form the Copeland Center and train a whole bunch of folks in how to use this model, offer a certification, facilitator training, and develop several different books using this model. Since 2003, this has really taken off and reached millions of folks through these books and workshops and trainings, informally and formally used in programs around the world, whether that's one-on-one from someone who's been trained as a facilitator in this process, or informal WRAP groups with other folks who are using this model. So as an evidence-based practice, what that specifically looks like and has been shown effective by the research is that folks who attend a group based in this model and done the way that it's intended to be done by 2 trained facilitators who are co-facilitating a process with a group of folks who have been trained by folks who are certified to train trainers. When they have all of these values and ethics in place, when it's grounded on the 5 key concepts that are foundational to RAP, that they realize the greatest benefit, that this really works. And the idea behind the development of RAP is that really that anyone, no matter their background or their history or their story, whether they have a degree or education or a title, whatever that might be, whatever their circumstances, however they view or describe themselves, that every person has the right to direct the course of their future, to predict where they want to go, to set goals, to work towards those goals, and to really determine who they want to be and how they want to get there. And when a person enters into a RAP group, they leave all of those other kind of titles and things at the door, and they enter into this process as equals. So if a person like myself, who also happens to be a trained clinician, is facilitating a RAP group, I leave that clinician hat at the door. I'm not a clinician. I'm entering into this process with other folks who have lived experience, and we're peers, and we're talking about what works and what doesn't work in terms of mental health recovery, in terms of mental wellness, in terms of really taking stock of my health, my journey, what that looks like, what I have access to, and how I can really empower myself to be my best me, and what do I need to achieve that. So really grounded in hope, the idea that people, no matter where they've been or what they're going through or how they currently describe their current circumstances, they get well, and they can be well and stay well for long periods of time. They can set goals and do whatever it is that they want to do, that really the sky is the limit if they empower themselves, find education, have support, set goals, and work towards those goals, that they can do what they want to do with their lives. And this is a model that can help them set that up for success. RAP really promotes the idea that I'm in control, so self-determination, right? And I can say where I want to go, but I also am responsible for doing that work, right? No one's going to do it for me. I can have support and assistance and resources, but really I have to do my own work. I have to be engaged in the process, actively engaged in the process. And I'm empowered then to make choices that I feel are right for me in my best interest, and ask for what I need, right? Advocate for myself. So when we talk about RAP groups and programs, everyone comes into the process as equal, right? We stress dignity and compassion and mutual respect, right? This idea of unconditional high regard, meaning people really are doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And so for some, that first step, doing the best they can, is to simply show up. And as we engage in the process and learn more coping skills, we can maybe exchange some that benefited us in the moment, but then no longer serve us, for things that are better serving us as we grow and learn more about ourselves and what works. And we have complete acceptance of diversity with relation to all kinds of things: culture, ethnicity, language, religion, age, gender, race, all of those things, right? And sexual identity readiness issues, meaning how ready I am to engage in this whole process, right? How much I want to use the things that I might learn in the process of doing a RAP. All of those things are equal, right? Everyone is accepted exactly where they are in whatever space they show up in to do this work. It's based on the idea that really there's no limit, right? If I want to engage in this process, there are folks that can support me, and I can continue to move forward in a direction that I choose and continue to put effort towards my recovery and achieving my goals. This entire process only works if it's voluntary. So RAP is not something that can be mandated. It's not something that a family member can say, you need to do this, or a court can mandate that this would be effective for your treatment, so you need to do this. No one can tell you that you have to do this. It's completely voluntary. And of course, the more you put into this process, the more you engage, just like with most things, the more you're likely to get out of it. So the entire process, from deciding you're going to look into what does RAP look like, to beginning to develop your own wellness recovery action plan, how I want to do that or set it up, whether I want to write it down or not. There's some apps and technology that could be helpful, whatever that looks like, however long that process takes. If I want to engage other people in helping me or in that process, all of that's completely voluntary and completely self-directed. I'm in control of that process, and others may come alongside and offer insight or resources or education, or maybe share what's worked in their experience, but no one's going to tell me how to do that, right? So completely voluntary and up to me. And I, as a person putting together my plan, am the subject matter expert on myself, meaning I know myself best, right? I know what my lived experience has been. I know what I've tried before and maybe what has or hasn't worked. I know things that work in certain circumstances and maybe not in others. I know what I'm willing to try, and I know my level of motivation. I know all of those things about my experience that other people don't know because they're not me, right? So I bring all of that to the table, and that's a strength. We focus on individual strengths and away from kind of deficits or barriers in RAP. We identify them and then look for proactive ways to help move through them as we move through this process. So one of the ways that we do that in creating this sense of equality and respect for everyone is not using clinical or medical language or diagnostic labels, if that can be helped. Really, again, this is about a proactive way of holistically looking at myself and what I have access to enhance and create wellness in my life. And I'm working together with other people. So I might get some really cool ideas and perspectives that I haven't thought about. I've actually picked up some amazing things in the groups that I facilitate, things I hadn't thought about in terms of additional tools or resources or ways of looking at things that I hadn't considered before that really enhanced my own wellness. So it's really this building of a sense of community and strategies that are simple and safe and accessible. So I want to think of things that I have access to no matter where I am. So maybe some internal things like shifting how I might view a situation or my thinking, or reaching out for help to supporters or friends or family, or even some grounding techniques, things like, taking a deep breath, right? I can do that no matter where I am. And really away from some things that might have some potentially dangerous or serious side effects. We encourage conversations with the medical community, a mental health community, if that's what works for folks, but really looking at a holistic, integrated perspective about what's available in terms of wellness. And really having this trauma-informed perspective that difficult feelings and behaviors are a normal response to difficult and potentially traumatic life circumstances. So just because I think or feel a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that I have a particular illness or diagnosis. It might be a symptom, but it could be just a normal reaction to what is happening in your life, some potentially difficult circumstances. And that perspective really opens up a conversation that might be limited when we use some of those other terms or diagnostic labels. Sometimes that can shut folks down. So having this perspective that life happens and sometimes it's hard, and here's a way that we can think about it, and what resources do I have or do I need in order to support myself during those difficult circumstances. So I mentioned the 5 key concepts or foundational principles for RAP. And we start with hope as the first one, and really because that's the idea that I can recover, right? We can recover, we can be well, we can stay well for long periods of time. That doesn't mean that a relapse or symptoms won't reappear, or that we won't have times of struggle or difficulty. But what that means is that we can succeed, right? And so if we have that core belief that I can be well, I can experience wellness, and I can have long periods of that, then I'm really ready then to take responsibility for what does that look like, and what do I need to promote that and to sustain that in my life. So I'm taking personal responsibility. No one else can do this work for me. I can ask for help, and that comes in the form of support in that last key concept, but really I have to engage this work myself and really take a look at what do I need? Do I need to build skills? Do I need to have additional support? What is it that helps me? And that moves us into education and empowerment, right? I don't know what I don't know. So I need to learn as much as possible about myself, physically, mentally, the way that I think and feel and experience things. What is the connection between maybe my past experiences and how I view the world right now? We know that a lot of experiences that happen in formative years, maybe adverse childhood experiences or trauma that can happen both in childhood or later on in life, that shapes our sense of being and safety and interacting in the world. So what's the relationship between that and how I might be feeling or reacting to a given set of life circumstances. And having that knowledge about how I interact, and then also resources, tools, training, treatments. What do I have at my disposal? What might help? Being open to try new things, that empowers me to really take control and then advocate for myself, right? Really determine and set my own goals about who I want to be, how I want to show up in the world, what do I want to achieve, and what do I need for those things to happen? So all of these 5 key concepts really work together collaboratively when I take a look at how I want to show up in the world and what is needed for me to do that. So the structure for WRAP has kind of 5 main sections. And we start by asking ourselves the question, what do I look like when I'm well? Or if you prefer, you can reframe that, when I'm at my best, what does my best me look like? How do I want to show up in the world, in relationships, at work, in all of the different roles or hats that I might wear? What does that look like when I'm my best version? Who do I want to present? And I ask that question so that I can kind of get this standard for myself, and I can use that to compare and contrast as I move through this process of developing a plan for maybe when I'm not showing up in that way. It prepares me with a benchmark, right? So then I look at, what do I have access to? And we call that a wellness toolbox, right? And I like to picture this like big, huge mechanics toolbox on wheels, like you see at professional garages, right? And I have all kinds of little tools in the top. And as you go closer to the ground, the drawers get bigger, and so do the tools. And ideally, when I'm doing really well, lots of options are great. And I don't necessarily need any heavy hitting tools to be in that space, right? But if life starts to hit me a little harder, then maybe I don't want so many options and I might need a bigger tool, right? So I kind of move down that process. And as we move through this process of developing our action plan, life is going to hit a little bit harder, and we'll kind of go along this continuum from balance and wellness, my best me, to what I look like when I'm in a crisis. And again, this is very subjective. I get to define those stages for myself, how I show up in those areas. So I'm going to start by looking at, what are all my resources? What tools are in my toolbox? And you can think about, what do I do when I make myself feel better? What are the things that bring purpose and meaning to my life? What helps me feel connected? These can be internal things like breathing or shifting inward for mindfulness or meditation. Can be guided and progressive relaxation, could be music, could be external things like exercise or relationships, socialization. It can be going for a walk or being out in nature, all kinds of things, right? What are the things that I have access to, strategies, resources that help me feel better? They can be formal services like seeing your doctor for physical health or a mental health professional, if that works. Can be other things that make up our holistic self. So, right, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, all of those components. I want to think about that in terms of what's in my wellness toolbox, what enhances those areas of my life and brings meaning and purpose. And then I shift that to, what are those things that I do every day that keep me in this balanced space, right? This space of wellness when I show up at my best. I'm going to make 2 lists at this point. I'm going to think about things I need to or have to do every day that keep me in this space. And then I'm going to have kind of a plan B of things I might do, but I don't necessarily have to do them every day. And when I'm working with folks talking about developing my daily maintenance plan, I talk about setting myself up for success. If I put 25 things on that list I have to do every day, what's the likelihood that I'm going to achieve all 25 things? Some days I might be super powered and super caffeinated, and I might get all 25 done. But the likelihood is that I'm not going to achieve that every day. So really asking yourself, is this something I have to do every day that keeps me in a good space? So some items that might be a must for one person won't necessarily be for everyone. Some people are wired, they want to get up and they want to shower every single day. They're going to have a workout, and they're going to have a cup of coffee, and they might not do it in that order, right? Other folks maybe shower every other day, and their workouts are 2 to 3 times a week, right? So really asking yourself, what's necessary every day? I'm a cup of coffee in the morning every day kind of person. I'm also a kind of person that really needs to have at least one meaningful social connection with a person that I'm in a relationship with. It doesn't have to be the same person, but one thing that's not related to work or not related to something maybe more surface level. It really needs to be a meaningful kind of soul connection kind of thing. And that could just be a check-in with one of my family members or friends, but I really need that to be in a good space. And when I get too busy and I neglect that, I feel out of balance. So asking yourself those questions: what keeps me feeling balanced? What do I need to do to stay in that space where I'm feeling well? So the next three sections are all going to be kind of balanced in terms of when life happens or this phase of life happens, and then what's the action plan that goes with that. So the action plan usually means we're pulling things from our wellness toolbox, that inventory of strategies that helps us feel well and balanced, to balance out whatever it is that life is kind of throwing our way, right? So stressors are kind of everyday life happening. Could also be called triggers, depending on which rap book you might take a look at. The language is interchangeable: stressors or triggers. So again, think about this as life is just happening. Traffic on the way to work, right? Anything that is outside of your control, external events or circumstances that maybe make you feel a little uncomfortable, right? Just a little off balance. Can also be some internal things too. Maybe physical health or things that throw you off balance, or maybe not getting enough sleep, right? So feelings and physical sensations can be part of that. Could be strong emotions that happen. All of these things that happen could be normal and natural reactions to traumatic events or to just stressful events that life is throwing at you. So a really good example, like we have all the time, would be traffic, right? You're going along and things are great, and then somebody cuts you off, and you have that sudden elevation in blood pressure. Maybe, depending on who you are, you might have some colorful language, right? Maybe pound the steering wheel, or if you're maybe not having any of those external things, maybe your heart starts pounding a little bit because you had to slam on the brakes, right? That's a natural reaction to a stressor that just happened. So what do you do then to bring yourself back down, right? If we don't respond to that, if we do nothing, then the potential is that could snowball, right, and kind of ruin your whole morning. Or we could bring it back into balance, respond to it, and take care of it. So what do we do? What's the action plan? So as we build our wrap, we specifically list and brainstorm a whole bunch of different things that might be stressors or triggers for you. What are the most common things that you experience on a regular basis that kind of get you a little bit heightened or feeling off balance? And then what are things that you can pull from, that you have an idea, so you're prepared ahead of time. And as we kind of shift our perspective to viewing the world from this lens, this framework, it becomes more like second nature in terms of, oh, I can do this or I could do that. So in the traffic incident, right, I could turn the radio on and put my favorite song on my MP3 player and blast the music and totally put myself back into a Zen space, right? So what would be your go-to if something happened like that? And then think of as exhaustive a list of you as you want to in terms of life is happening, stressors or triggers that are coming your way, and as exhaustive of a list as you want to in terms of what are tools, what's your action plan. The next section is early warning signs. And I have a couple of different analogies for this. So the idea between this whole action plan, right, is if we're kind of descending this staircase into stress and crisis, that's what's at the bottom of the staircase, and wellness and balance is at the top. The further I descend towards that crisis, right, the more energy and effort and time takes me to climb back up again to a space of balance and wellness, right? So if I can identify early on that something's happening and stop that descent and return back up to this space of balance, then I am taking less energy and time and effort descending the stairs, right? It's not that I can't climb the stairs again if I end up in crisis, but it takes more time and energy and effort. I might need more support. So if we can stop it early, that's what we want to do. Early warning signs are like that flashing caution light or like a check engine light that comes on in your car. Doesn't mean that your engine is going to explode. It means, hey, pay attention here, something's going on. So what are those things in your life that might be your early warning signs? What are the kind of nagging things that are sticking around, that even if you're doing those daily things that keep you up to speed in a good space, you're still feeling a little bit off. So for me, I'll share one of mine. Mine would be if I'm hitting snooze in the morning. Typically, my alarm goes off, or I'm awake before my alarm goes off, and I'm bouncing out of bed and hitting the shower, and then I'm having a cup of coffee on the way to work, right? That's my morning routine. But if something's off, so let's say I go to bed later than I should, or I didn't sleep well, and I'm hitting snooze, well, if that happens just one morning, then that's just an off morning. But if 5 mornings out of 7, I'm hitting snooze, or I'm hitting snooze 6 times, so I'm getting up 30 or 45 minutes late, I need to pay attention because something's going on, something's out of balance, right? So what are your early warning signs? Signs of change in how you're interacting, in your mood, that it's just a, hey, pay attention here. We need to have a little additional action. Your day-to-day stuff isn't enough. We need a little more, a little bigger tool to help you to move from that space of feeling a little off, not quite right, to be back in balance. So it requires intentionality, right? I need to pay attention, kind of slow down, hit pause, take stock, think about what's going on. And then again, I have that whole list of things in my wellness toolbox, right, that I can pull from that help me feel better. And I might need more of them, or maybe I have some that are a little heavier in terms of how they impact me, more impactful. So I'm going to use those things to reestablish balance. And again, it's helpful for me if I take kind of a holistic stock. Is there one area that's maybe out of balance? So did I have that meaningful social connection, or have I gotten too busy? Is my plate too full? So like my work-life balance is out of balance. Did I check in with my spiritual connection? Is that off, right? What is it that might be kind of that flashing caution light for you to pay attention? And the idea is if we don't pay attention here, then things are going to get worse. It's kind of that danger zone, right? What is the next thing that happens? And I want to avoid that if possible, right? So if that means that I'm reaching out for help, then I'm reaching out for help. If that means that there's some things I can do to be a little more intentional, then I'm going to do that. And something that's really important about this whole framework of wrap is that my wrap is going to look very different than your wrap, right? Or than someone else's wrap. So what fits into my category of stressors might be someone else's early warning sign, because they might have a lower threshold for certain things, or what sets me off might be different than what sets you off. And what is in my category for early warning signs, that check engine or flashing caution light, might be what is indicating for someone else that they're way out of balance. You know, like that washing machine is really thudding because it's got a thick blanket in it and it's making a lot of noise, or you've got a flat tire, right? So this is very individualized in terms of what this might look like for you. And so I would just take some time in making these lists in terms of what goes into each section, and really thinking about how much effort or support do you need to come back to balance. So how far down that staircase are you? How much time and energy does it take to climb back into that space of wellness, my best me, how I want to show up in the world? And that might indicate to you what goes into each of these categories, whether it's a stressor or an early warning sign, or whether it fits into the next category, which is framed as when things are breaking down. So up to this point, we might be able to kind of hide that things are going on. It might just be the chaos of life, or, you know, folks respond to the, hi, how are you doing? Oh, it's good, or life's a little stressful, but there's no more in-depth conversation. You might be kind of able to skate by with those surface level things until you get to this section. And when we're at this section, this is usually where it starts to become apparent, at least to those closest to us, that we're not in balance, that something's going on. So things are getting worse. And it could be we've been doing all the right things all along and life is just happening. And so despite our best efforts, things are still getting worse. And we're getting close to our crisis at this point. And again, every person is different. So what this looks like or what a crisis looks like is very individualized. That's a conversation I would encourage you to have both with yourself and those closest to you, because sometimes it's easier to ask those that we're in relationships with about, when you ask me, are you okay? If someone close to you asks that question, hey, are you all right? What is it that they saw in you or what was showing up in your interaction that led them to ask that question? Because those are typically the kinds of things that are showing up in this space when things are breaking down. And so we can start to kind of form a list that way if we have trouble just doing self-reflection and coming up with what that might look like. And again, the idea is really focusing on making sure there aren't any safety concerns. So depending on your journey, that may or may not be an issue. So it's just something to think about in terms of keeping yourself and other people safe, and ensuring that we really are engaging in the work at this point, because there are things that we need to do to come back into balance. And it can feel really overwhelming and difficult because often when we're not at our best, our motivation is really low, right? So even small, simple things can seem super overwhelming when you've got 20 million things on your plate. So identifying what are those key crucial things that are going to be most beneficial and, again, easily accessible for you to do. We don't want there to be tons of time and energy and effort to access those things that are going to help bring us back into balance when we're in this space. And again, moving into crisis, what that might look like for you, despite best efforts. And sometimes life just hits really hard. So it's not always a gradual process to go from being great and in balance and showing up in life like I want to show up and in relationships how I want to be. And then sometimes life tragically happens and I go through all of these stages in the course of 5 minutes and I find myself in a crisis, feeling overwhelmed. And really, crisis is when circumstances external happening are beyond my coping skills to handle, right? I just don't have the skills to handle in that moment what's going on. So I'm feeling overwhelmed. So this is a time where I need other people to step in and help me. And again, depending on what your crisis looks like for you, the level of support and intervention you need in this space is going to be very individualized. So for some folks, a mental health day off from work, if that's a luxury that you have, could be just kind of what is needed to bring yourself into balance. For others, it might be, a good long conversation with a trusted colleague or friend, someone you have a relationship and connection with, where you can just kind of let everything out, and maybe they don't need to fix it or offer advice. You just need a safe space to process everything that's going on. For others, it might be more intervention in terms of reaching out for professional help or peer support or a mental health appointment. It doesn't always mean someone's going to end up inpatient in a locked mental health facility. That's kind of where a lot of people go when they hear the term crisis. It's not necessarily calling the crisis line or 911, although if that is a need, that's something that we encourage folks to put into their wellness recovery action plan if that's services that would be helpful. Again, safety for yourself and others is something that is really important, and we don't want to minimize that. So things that we ask folks to consider when they're putting together a crisis plan: first of all, this entire plan should be done when you're in a space of wellness, right? When I'm my best or close to my best self and I'm thinking very clearly and I can really do this self-assessment. I can really enter into conversations with people that I might choose to include in this process as part of my support system, as part of the tools in my toolbox, helping with some of the education and advocacy conversations I might be having. But specifically the crisis plan, we want to be in a good space when we do this. And we're going to think about things like who is supporting me, friends, families, professionals, medications, if that's relevant or applicable, where I might find care and support. So for some folks, that might be a spiritual community like their church. For other folks, that might be a formal medical community or mental health community. It can be specific treatments that are helpful, holistic or integrated care, meditation or other things that might be helpful. I think of a lot of agencies moving towards this whole health perspective and integrated healthcare. Those are things to consider if they're helpful. Homeopathic things, if that's helpful. Specific facilities or agencies that might provide support, if that's something that's helpful. And then help from others. And when we talk about help from others, we're talking about supporters. And there's a recommendation that we think of at least 5 people. 5 people that when we're building this wrap plan, we can have, and intentionally thinking about who are those 5 people and what might they do to support me and how does that look, right? And then having conversations with them. I want to set myself up for success and I want to set them up for success. So if I'm going to identify someone maybe that might make a casserole and bring it over or help me clean my kitchen because the dishes have overrun the sink and I need assistance with that, who's the person that's going to do that? Well, if I have a best friend who hates to do dishes and their sink is overrun, they might not be the person I asked to help me with that, right? Or if someone's going to pick up my mail, it needs to be someone that I trust, right? Are there fuzzies in the house, little animals, cats, dogs? Can someone help to feed them? What are those things that would be helpful for you? So kind of make a list of those things that maybe people can take some of that responsibility off your plate. What does that look like? What do they need to do those tasks? And set them up for success and be as specific about it as possible so that they feel empowered to help you. And then you're having this conversation with them. It shouldn't be a surprise to the people who are your supporters that they're supporting you and they're in your plan. It really needs to be an active conversation. And we want to play to their strengths, right? Things that they're good at. If you have someone that's particularly good at listening and you just need someone to create a space for you to just be a safe space, then that's what we ask them to do. And we tell them that that's what we would like. And then we have this conversation about here's what you would look for as cues that I need you to do what we've talked about in terms of supporting me. If you see this show up, then I need you to show up in this way and help me specifically do A, B, and C. And also the other half of that conversation is when I'm coming out of this space where I'm not doing so well and I don't need all of that support, you're going to start to see these things show up again. I'm going to start to look like my old me, right? The regular me, the balanced, healthy space, right? These things show up. So then people feel comfortable putting those things back on our plate because often they don't want to burden us. And if they're helping us, we want them to feel confident that we can handle it when they let go of the reins and they give us back those things that they kind of took on for a period of time, whatever that might look like. And then I want to think intentionally about what does it look like as I'm coming out of this space of crisis and plan for success to gradually take some of these things back onto my plate? Are there things I could put on the back burner so that I'm not overburdened? So I'm not going to come out of this space of I've been intentional and invested in my wellness. I've rested. I've regained some balance. Then I jump right back into the very overwhelmed, busy, chaotic space that had me feeling overwhelmed and in crisis in the first place, right? I want to gradually take those things back on as I come back into balance so that I'm set up for success and I don't have a setback. So what does that look like? So this slide just has a whole bunch of different kinds of wrap plans or books that would help folks develop a wrap. So really there's a basic one, and I feel that anyone benefits from having a wrap, whether you have a formal mental health or recovery journey. If that's your lived experience, that's great. But this is such a balanced, holistic way to just do life, right? I'm looking at what are the strengths that I bring and how do I want to show up in the world and what supports me in being that kind of person? What supports me in having those kinds of relationships? What do I need to achieve my goals and my dreams, right? And I'm planning for the things that might set me back or get in the way or kind of knock me off my feet a little bit. And I have a plan ahead of time so I feel prepared when life happens, as it inevitably does, right? So there's specific wraps for various circumstances that might apply for folks that are in addiction or incarcerated. There's one for veterans, which is the one that I happen to use a lot since I work at a VA medical facility. There's a pocket version, so you can just have this very basic framework we've talked about tonight. You can put it in your wallet or your purse. There's also an app that's free right now because of COVID. You can download that and put this whole process into your smartphone. And then there's kind of a deep dive version of this. And then there's a supplement. It's not a full wellness recovery action plan. It's not a wrap, but it's intended to be used in a similar process. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And it was released specifically for dealing with the unique situation that we as human beings on this planet found ourselves in the last 12 to 16 months, right? this thing called COVID-19, a worldwide pandemic. And suddenly things like social isolation and social distancing and telework all became part of our everyday vocabulary, right? And people were trying to figure out, how do I do life in the middle of a pandemic when a lot of the things that helped me do life in a balanced, connected, meaningful way aren't available to me anymore? I don't have access to 3/4 of my toolbox. I can't do that. I can't go to the gym. Going to the grocery store presents increased anxiety and risk, right? I can't meet my friends for coffee, or I'm meeting them through a screen and it's not the same. So given all of those dynamics, they released a wellness guide for overcoming isolation. And really what this does is walk us through a process of thinking about connection in a new way. When we're experiencing isolation and loneliness, there's a lot of different ways to frame connection outside of, but including, social connection, face-to-face interaction with friends and loved ones, right? That's one part of connection, but there's so much more. So what does that look like? That's the first thing that this guide helps us to explore. What is connection? And then how do we enjoy time alone and know the difference between alone time and isolation, right? One can be very meaningful and have a lot of purpose, and the other might feel really scary and could be potentially an avoidance coping skill, right? How do we know the difference? What are tools I have for connection in my life? How can I help create that through daily routine and structure? And again, that really important piece of support. I'm not doing this alone, even though I might be physically alone in my space, depending on my circumstances. So the folks that put together WRAP put together this guide in terms of helping us all kind of have a framework for navigating through this whole process. It's free for download. So there's a link at the end of my slides, and we can provide that to anyone who might want that on the Facebook page for folks to be able to download this guide for themselves and fill it out. So the first part of this guide has us asking the question, what is connection, right? And it's the link that we have with both our internal self, with ourself, right? Our whole self and all of those things that make up who we are, and our link with the world outside of ourselves, which is usually what we think of when we think of connection. It can be with people, places, experiences, right? We can feel connected when we're reminiscing about past experiences, right? Places and ideas, and then connecting with ourself. So we start by asking the question, what does connection mean for me? And then creating room for expanding that definition into what can connection mean for me? And how do we take steps towards connection or reconnection if there are connections that we've let lapse for whatever reason? And a lot of times there are pieces of ourself that were once very meaningful and fulfilling, and we're going to let them lapse because we had too many things on our plate, right? They got put on the back burner or into storage somewhere. And now do we have an opportunity to reconnect, to reinvest time and energy into something that brought us purpose and meaning in our life? And then enjoying alone time, right? Feeling lonely is a feeling, right? It doesn't have to be something we need to escape or avoid. Feeling lonely and being alone are different. And how do we look at that? We can connect to those feelings of loneliness and isolation. And when we connect to those, we can then move through them and find meaning and purpose, and maybe discover new things about ourselves that we didn't know. And as we move through that experience, can we take advantage of the opportunity or embrace the experience of being alone as a way to connect to parts of ourselves that we haven't met yet, like learn something new about who I am or expand my perspective, or connect to parts of myself that maybe I've lost touch. So I think of an example, a lot of folks who either didn't know how to play an instrument or had played one and hadn't played it in years, and in a past life they had played guitar or something, they picked it up and learned to play, or they reintroduced themselves with that part of themselves that knew how to play before, right? They found something, meaning and purpose in something they used to do. So spending time alone can also be a time of self-discovery and healing. So what does that look like? And what do I need to support myself feeling both comfortable and safe? Because none of this happens if I don't have a feeling of safety, right? So I need to start with that question of, how do I feel safe being alone, and addressing some of those things that might have me feeling unsafe. And then once I've established safety, how can I enjoy that time alone? What does it mean to connect with myself and find meaning and purpose in those activities? And then looking at tools for connection, discovering and rediscovering ways that support us finding connection, whether that's through technology and other tools that we have access to, or some of the other things that we've talked about in terms of, I want to be actively engaged in my wellness. So what do I need to be in that space, even when things look differently because of circumstances changing, whether that's a global pandemic or something else, right? And then really choosing to engage actively and intentionally in this process, this evaluation assessment of what connection looks like for me, and continuing to choose on a day-to-day basis, how do I stay connected? What does that look like? What tools do I have? Because they can be social, but they might be individual things. I could feel connected riding my bike. I could feel connected lying in a hammock under a tree in my backyard, right? What does that look like for me? And what are those things that I can do to support that? Some of them show up in terms of routine and structure, but again, this challenges us to talk about this in terms of connection. So if I plan for and start every day with this vision of what I want, this intention, goals that I have, and some of them can be task oriented, right? A to-do list, things I need to accomplish, but also I want to put intention into my daily routine for being connected. As I mentioned, something that's really important for me is a meaningful, beyond surface level social connection, interaction with someone that I have a relationship with. So I need to plan and be proactive for that, because it doesn't always happen naturally, right? So what does connection look like and feel like for me today? How can I integrate that into my daily routine? Maybe that's creating a list, right? So that I can be intentional and prioritize connection, really moving that to the forefront as something that's important. Actively engaging. Ask questions, right? How can I have a daily routine that supports connection? What are opportunities that I can work into my daily routine to really foster those connections? What is my daily routine? Maybe I don't have one. So that's an opportunity to then create some structure, right? Daily routine is one way to create structure, but setting goals and having SMART goals as a tool to measure progress and look at, am I moving towards what I want in my life? That's another way to create some structure. Having a support system or people that you check in with about the things that matter to you and the goals that you're moving towards, an accountability system, that's another way to have structure. We can choose supports, both internal and external, both things and resources and relationships and activities that give us support, that put meaning and purpose into our life and help us create a welcome sense of change. So we're embracing it instead of having that feeling of anxiety related to change, because we have healthy boundaries. We're feeling empowered and in control because we're intentionally creating this structure in our life, right? So I'm directing where things are going. So I can ask, how do I want to use structure? How can I create structure that helps me create healthy boundaries and healthy relationships? What are things I might want to do today that put some structure and meaning and purpose into my life? And again, we aren't on this journey alone, right? So what are the ways that I can think about connection in terms of support? And this is a two-way street, right? And so we are actually talking about social connection here with other people in the context of relationships, right? Healing and support happens in relationships. So what is it that the people I'm in relationship with, what are the qualities they have? What is it about them that makes those meaningful connections, positive connections, healthy connections? What are those things that show up in that relationship? And what are the things that I cultivate in myself so that I'm that kind of person in relationships, right? I want to foster those connections, not just ask for them. So how do I be intentional in how I show up in the world, how I interact with people in my environment? Am I taking care of myself so I can be in that space to have that to offer to other people in connection? What are the qualities that support healthy connections, both in myself and in others? How do I be intentional about creating that, about building that, supporting that so that it's sustainable in my life? So that's the kind of community that I want to be a part of, right? I want to create that. And then really making sure that there's also those internal connections too. I don't want to give so much that my cup is empty. I need to fill my cup as well. So I'm intentionally thinking about the connections I have with myself and the connections that I have with other people, and making sure that that too is in balance, right? And the whole idea behind this wellness guide for isolation is reframing, changing the dialogue, the conversation that we have about connection, about what that looks like and how we engage the world around us, even when the world around us is really uncertain, even when the world around us is experiencing a global pandemic and things are very different than they were a year ago, right? But we can still engage in this process in a way that makes connections with ourselves and with others that holistically supports all of us, right? Engages all of the things that matter to us, infuses meaning and purpose in all of those areas, and helps us to better connect to ourselves and other people in the world around us, even if those connections look a little different than they did. And that's how we really have meaning and purpose and thrive, even when things look very, very different than they did. And the first step starts with asking that question. What do I need to be connected? What does connection mean to me? What do I look like when I'm well? What is my best version of me? What's the space I want to create for myself? How do I want to show up in the world? All of those questions are a really great place to start. And these are some resources in terms of where you can find more information related to WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. You can also download the Wellness Guide for Isolation. You can Google that and it will come up as well in terms of wanting to find that. Like I said, we can also put the link on the Facebook page for folks to be able to find that. And that's a free download. And I would entertain any questions or comments if folks have been putting them in as we've gone along. I'd be happy to answer any of those as well. Katie, were there any comments in the chat?
Sierra, should I go ahead and stop the recording?
You're going to stop the recording. That's fine. Thanks, April.